Assalamualaikum. I'm Dr. Nas and again I'm here with a new topic. Today we will discuss about other ischemic syndromes and especially we will focus on MINOCA, myocardial infarction in non-obstructive coronary artery diseases. So in other ischemic syndromes you have actually three things. One is silent ischemias. Second is you have microvascular angina or syndrome X, and third last but not the least you have stress cardiomyopathy or Takotsubo disease, and it has various names actually. Sometimes it called as a Takotsubo disease or syndrome, okay, and sometimes it called as a stress cardiomyopathy, and sometimes it also known as a transient LV dysfunction syndrome. Okay, so silent ischemias, as its name shows that there is something going on with ischemia, but it would be silent in nature. It would be silent. Patient would not have any symptoms with it. So it has actually three types. You have actually three types with the silent ischemia, but as name shows that ischemia, okay, so there is going on ischemia, but it would be silent with the patient. So we will discuss actually all three things. Silent ischemia, microvascular angina, stress cardiomyopathy are other ischemic disorders, okay, but in other ischemic disorders you have two things which are myocardial infarction with non-obstructive, in which the coronary artery will not be obstructed because of the atherosclerosis. Okay, so these two things actually will be MINOCA. MINOCA means myocardial infarction in non-obstructive coronary artery disease, but obviously the type 1 and type 2 of microvascular angina come in the domain of MINOCA, but the 3 and 4 we will discuss it later on in a briefly we will discuss it, that what is the type 1 to the type 4. So but for now, up to now, you just remember that the type 1 and the type 2 of the microvascular angina and stress cardiomyopathy come in the domain of myocardial infarction in non-obstructive coronary artery disease, but the rest of the things like in silent ischemia and the type 3 and type 4 of microvascular angina has some coronary artery disease. Okay, so so the silent ischemia and the microvascular angina type 3 and type 4 would have coronary artery disease, would have atherosclerosis process or plaques in their coronaries, but the type 1 and the type 2 and the stress cardiomyopathy would not have atherosclerotic disease in their coronary artery in their coronary arteries. So first of all we will discuss about the silent ischemia. So the type 1 of silent ischemia. What is type 1 of silent ischemia? Type 1 of silent ischemia is actually those patients who are asymptomatic, no symptoms at all, but they have evidence of ischemia, not MI but ischemia, any sort of evidence of ischemia, like on ECGs, on echo, okay, and on CT scans, on MRI, you would have any pattern or any evidence of ischemia in your myocardium. So, and the patient has no symptoms at all, with no previous history of like chest pain at all, then your patient probably has type 1 of silent ischemia. Now we will discuss the type 2. What is a type 2? Type 2 is actually those patients who sometimes become symptomatic, but then later on became asymptomatic. Okay, so they have symptomatic MIs, but then subsequently they would develop asymptomatic, a long asymptomatic period of ischemias. But in all these, both conditions, your patient would have ischemia, but that would be silent because patient would not have symptoms. Okay, so in this, patient will give you the history of like a brief period of symptoms, then after that brief period of symptoms, patient would have no symptoms at all for the longer period. And in this condition, usually your patient would have abnormal pain thresholds. Their pain thresholds are really actually high. That's why your patient won't give or complaints about, your patient would not complain about the symptoms and or about the chest pains. Now the type 3, what is actually type 3? Type 3 of silent ischemia is it is actually the largest population of the silent ischemia, in which there is a symptomatic and asymptomatic ischemia. Sometimes it is symptomatic and sometimes asymptomatic, but more of the time your patient would have stable type symptoms like chronic inguinal symptoms. Your patient would have a chronic inguinal symptom. So we have a type 1, type 2 and type 3. The major portion is obviously this one, and actually this thing comes in the domain of stable ischemic heart disease, but we are discussing here it as other ischemic disorders because this is not rare at all, because more than 40% of your patient remain silent with ischemias. That's why newly guidelines and newly updated literature have distributed into 3 groups: 1, 2 and 3. 1 asymptomatic but evidence no symptoms at all; 2 have symptoms with brief symptoms and then would have a longer period of no symptoms, but this patient would have a history of MI. This in type 1 it is not necessary that your patient would have a history of MI, but in type 2 your patient would have history of MI. With the history of MI, and then but patient would not have a symptoms at all at present, or just patient will give you the history of like a very little history about the chest pain because of the abnormal pain threshold. And 3 is obviously, as we discussed, that sometimes they become symptomatic and sometimes they become asymptomatic, and this is because your patient would be a probably chronic inguinal symptoms. And how you would treat it? You would treat it like a stable ischemic heart disease. You will obviously evaluate the risk modification and risk modifiers, and then obviously you will do the risk modification with the therapy of the stable ischemia, as we have discussed earlier. Now the important thing which we are going to discuss is actually very important, that is the microvascular angina. Okay, now what is the microvascular angina? The microvascular angina is very important to discuss here. Again, microvascular angina has 4 classes: class 1 and class 2, class 3 and class 4. So class 1 is actually, okay, what is the pathophysiology of microvascular angina is very necessary to understand before going towards the classification, because its whole classification depends upon the CMD. And what is the CMD? Coronary microvascular dysfunction. So what does it actually mean? That if this is if your heart, so obviously your heart has 3 coronaries which are probably coming from, okay, I am very poor painter and I cannot draw actually a good drawings, so I can draw but it would take some time for you. That's why I just don't want to take your much time, that's why. So just focus here, that we have three arteries. Supposedly it is RCA, it is CIRC, and it is LAD. Okay, so in microvascular angina, obviously these arteries would be divided and would be distributed in the myocardium as microvascular channels, as microvascular channels in myocardium. So in this microvascular angina, that coronaries would be normal. The flow in the coronaries, when you look the angiography, then you will appreciate the normal coronaries and the normal flow in your patients, but your patient would have a symptoms, and the typical symptoms of the ischemia, then you need to consider about the coronary microvascular dysfunction. There would be probably the dysfunction, atherosclerosis, or anything going on in this microvascular channels, which is actually occluded or have default or any fault in it, or any disease in the microvascular channels would cause microvascular angina or syndrome X. Nowadays we won't use syndrome X. What is the meaning of syndrome X? Syndrome means symptoms, but X means no coronary artery disease. Like you cannot see with the naked eyes on angiography the plaques or any obstruction in the coronary artery. That's why initially it was called as syndrome. Syndrome means patient would have a symptoms, but X means no coronary artery disease on coronary angiography. But nowadays it is more commonly used known as microvascular angina. So got the point that the coronaries would be normal when microvascular angina, but there would be a problem, there would be a disease in coronary microvasculature. That's why the pathophysiology behind the microvascular angina is coronary microvascular dysfunction. Okay, so there are the four classes. There are four classes of microvascular angina. Group 1 are those patients who have CMD but no coronary artery disease, as we discuss here, the microvascular angina and the syndrome X. Okay, those patients, why actually we obsolete the name of syndrome X has been obsoleted by the our literature and the data and the researchers, because syndrome X only syndrome X explains the pathophysiology of 1 and 2 only. Just let me tell you about this, and then we will come over here that why we have changed the name from syndrome X to microvascular angina. So group 1, you would have a coronary myocardial dysfunction, like the dysfunction in the microvascular channels, but the coronary arteries would be normal. There would be no obstruction in the coronaries. And the group 2 includes the CMD in the setting of myocardial disease. Again, this would be a CMD, no coronary artery disease, but it would be secondary to any hypertrophy or any disease which would cause the hypertrophy of myocardium. What would be those? Obviously, what are the diseases which cause the myocardial hypertrophy? You would know, obviously you would tell me that this is aortic stenosis, hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, hypertension, sclerosis, amyloidosis. All these causes what? These are the infiltrated diseases and causes the pathophysiology and the pathology and causes the disease in the myocardium. That's why the channels which are present in the myocardium would become dysfunctioned. That's why they become dysfunctional. So why? Because of the hypertrophy caused by these things. That's why in group 2 we divide the patient of microvascular angina, or those patients who have a coronary myocardial dysfunction. Okay, but that dysfunction because of hypertrophy, and this hypertrophy would be because of any infiltrative disease or any disease which would cause the hypertrophy of the myocardium. So now these two things, as you will appreciate here, that have no coronary artery disease. So now 3 and what is 3 and the 4? So 3 is actually CMD with coronary artery disease. For suppose you have your patient who would have a coronary artery disease, and that you are appreciating that this coronary artery disease actually is not that important, or it's not that obstructive in nature, and it would have a very good flow, but despite of that your patient would develop the symptoms, or your patient is complaining about the symptoms or the chest pains. Excuse me. So actually group 3 contains all those patients who have a myocardial dysfunction plus coronary artery disease, and group 4 is actually the same one, coronary myocardial dysfunction plus the coronary artery disease, and the coronary myocardial dysfunction occurs because of reperfusion of coronary artery disease. The dysfunction becomes active, or the dysfunction becomes prominent because of the coronary artery disease. As you will open the coronary artery, or you do the intervention with the coronary artery, so it actually disperses, or it actually showers the plaque and the thrombus in the microvasculature, in the coronary microvasculature in the myocardium, that would eventually causes what? Coronary myocardial dysfunction. So all those patients who would have coronary myocardial dysfunction with coronary artery disease, and this coronary myocardial dysfunction is just because of the reperfusion of the coronary artery disease, that those patients would come into the 4 group. So as now you appreciate that in those 1 or 2 have no coronary artery disease but coronary myocardial dysfunction. That's why initially scientists and researchers was not aware about the pathophysiology of syndrome X, because patient at that time patient did have a symptoms, but they did not have the coronary artery disease. That's why they were called it as syndrome X. But as obviously we got all the evidences and all these things, and with the better non-invasive investigations, so we come to the conclusion that the 1 and 2 are actually those patients who have a no coronary artery disease. So they also come into the domain of myocardial MINOCA, myocardial and non-obstructive coronary artery disease. Okay, so what would be the treatment of this? Obviously the treatment of this 3 and 4 remain same as of coronary artery disease, because these patients would have established coronary artery disease. You need to open those plaques, or you have to intervene those lesions who are according to your guidelines, as we have discussed in our stable ischemic heart disease, that when we have to open all those structures, because as we do the FFR and CFR in those patients, obviously in FFR less than 0.8 and CFR less than 2, okay, is actually significant and is actually evident of physiologically important physiologically or pathophysiologically important lesions, and those lesions who would have a FFR of less than 0.8 and a CFR of less than 2 or 2.5, so we need to intervene those lesions, because these lesions are actually pathophysiologically significant. And the therapy remains same. But now the problem is with these two things, 1 and 2, because in this there is no established coronary artery disease. So you need to correct what? You need to correct the risk modification, and sometimes these patients would have obviously especially group 2 or sometimes these patients would have a remodeling. So that's why AC inhibitors and beta blockers, because of to just reversing the modeling, or just to troubleshooting the modeling, remodeling. So you need to give ACE and beta blockers, but none of the therapy is actually evident or approved by the HA or ESC. But most of the time, if your patient has symptoms and you are suspecting the CMD, you need to correct the risk factors only. But if you are suspecting and you want to give the standard ischemic therapy, stable ischemia therapy of stable ischemia, you can give to your patients, or the therapy of the stable ischemia. Now the most important thing is stress cardiomyopathy. The very important, very important is Takotsubo disease and stress cardiomyopathy. Stress cardiomyopathy or Takotsubo syndrome. So in this syndrome, actually so this is LA and this is LV. So in Takotsubo and the stress cardiomyopathy is actually the cardiomyopathy in which your coronaries is normal. Your coronaries are normal. This is suppose LAD and this is circ. Okay. So in the pathophysiology behind the stress cardiomyopathy, and then we will discuss it, that why we called it as a Takotsubo disease later on. So first of all, the pathophysiology. What is the pathophysiology behind the stress cardiomyopathy? The pathophysiology behind the stress cardiomyopathy is that due to catecholamine surge or increase catecholaminergic surge, there would be a spasm of coronaries. Severe spasm of coronaries causes the transient LV dysfunction. That's why it is also called as transient LV dysfunction syndrome. Okay, what would actually happen here in this stress cardiomyopathy, that there will be a spasm in the coronary arteries, any of coronary, and most of the time that affects the apex of the heart, the apex of the LV apex. That's why you would have the akinesia of the apex in stress cardiomyopathy, because most of the time the distal part of the LAD is involved in it. That's why it causes the spasm of the LAD. That's why because of the catecholaminergic surge causes the spasm in the LAD, and the spasm in the LAD causes akinesia of the apex. So now anything which causes the surge of the catecholamines, such as emotional distress or any severe exertion or anything which actually causes the catecholaminergic surge, causes the spasm and stress cardiomyopathy. That's why it is also known as a broken heart syndrome. Broken heart syndrome, and it is most commonly occurs in females. There is a female predominant ratio with the stress cardiomyopathy, which we have discussed here about, which we the pathophysiology which we discussed here of the stress cardiomyopathy. Now why it is called as a Takotsubo? Takotsubo is actually an octopus trap in Japan, and this disease is actually common in Japan. That's why it is also called as a Takotsubo disease, and the Takotsubo is actually the octopus trap. So when the patient suffers with the stress cardiomyopathy, its LV looks like a Takotsubo. That's why we called it as a Takotsubo disease or Takotsubo syndrome. Takotsubo look like this. So when LV actually looks like this Takotsubo trap, This is a trap which actually used by Japanese fishermen in the sea to catch the octopus from in the sea. So what happens actually with the LV, because of the akinesia of apex, there would be a hyperkinesia of base or septum. So when the hyperkinesia occurs at the basal portion of the heart, and the apex of heart would become akinetic, so it would look like a octopus trap on echocardiography or MRI. That's why we called it as we call it as Takotsubo disease. Now come to, as we have discussed about the pathophysiology, the types of Takotsubo. The most common type is obviously basal type. One is a basal type. Basal type, in which there will be the Takotsubo or the akinesia of the base. Akinesia of base. This is the most common type, type 1 type. When there is a akinesia of base, in type 1 there would be the akinesia of apex, in which you would get the Takotsubo or octopus trap on the echo and MRI, but your patient may have the Takotsubo or this cardiomyopathy or akinesia of any portion of the heart. So if your patient has akinesia of basal portion of the heart because of the stress cardiomyopathy, because of the stress, so your patient has probably what? First one is apical Takotsubo, second is basal Takotsubo, third one is non-apical, this basal and focal like at any part of the heart, like this one or this one or this one, any focal part of the heart would be involved because of the so stress cardiomyopathy would be called as a focal cardiomyopathy, stress cardiomyopathy, basal stress cardiomyopathy, and this apical Takotsubo. These all are the names of and the types of the stress cardiomyopathy, and these both are also known as non-apical, because apical is most commonest like area which involve in stress cardiomyopathy with the patient in stress cardiomyopathy. Okay, so as we have discussed here that the coronary remains normal, so when your patient would present in the ER, what will be your approach? Obviously your approach will remain same. You will get the ECG done, you will get the echo done if you are suspecting anything bad, because your patient would be in class 3 or 4, clip class 3 or 4, and your patient would have a acute ST elevation MI probably, because most of the time anterior wall would be involved, because as I discussed here that in most of the time stress cardiomyopathy apex will be apical heart, apical LV would be involved, so there would be the ST elevation in the anterior wall MI. You have to prepare your patient for the coronary primary PCI or reperfusion as per protocol, as per AHA guidelines. But if you will find the coronary is normal, then obviously you have to think about these things. If your coronaries are absolutely normal, then you have to think, obviously you need to take the brief history of your patients, and you need to rule out the stress cardiomyopathy if your suspicion is very high. But with the suspicion or with the provisional diagnosis or the working diagnosis of stress cardiomyopathy, you cannot delay the coronary angiogram in ST elevation MI. If your patient is presenting in the ER with ST elevation MI and you are suspecting the stress cardiomyopathy, if your patient is young with no risk with no risk factors, and with the an event preceding all these things, so obviously you need to take the history about it, but you cannot delay the angiography of your patient just because of your history and your suspicion. Okay, so how you would treat these patients? You need to treat this with the obviously If your patient has LV dysfunction, then you need to treat it with the AC inhibitors and beta blockers, okay, and but you will not give the statins, because there is no plaque, there is no atherosclerosis disease, there is nothing to do with the statins, with the DAPT, because obviously your coronaries are normal. If you get the normal coronaries, then you will not go for primary PCI, primary percutaneous intervention. That's why there is nothing to do with the statin and the DAPT. Yes, but if you are preparing your patient in the ER with the suspicion of stress cardiomyopathy and sending the patient for primary PCI from the ER with the ST elevation MI, then you need to treat all those patients alike. You have treated your patient of ST elevation MI, because you cannot just rule out the stress cardiomyopathy on the basis of your history. You have to give the DAPTs and the antiplatelets and the aspirin and all these things which we give in our which we give actually to the patients of ST elevation MI. Why? Because this is actually very rare disease, and you cannot say it that because if on the suspicion you can miss so many MIs. But the prognosis of this LV dysfunction is most of the time transient, and the prognosis is Takotsubo and stress cardiomyopathy is actually very good. Only mortality is in hospital mortality is 2%, 2 to 7%. In hospital mortality is 2 to 7%, and most of the time 90% patient would recover from the LV dysfunction. Only for the LV dysfunction you have to give the all those things which are actually essential for the LV dysfunction, like the AC inhibitors and beta blocker, which gives the effect of negative remodeling and helps the patient to recover its LV very soon. Okay, as we discuss here the stress cardiomyopathy and all these things, so I don't think so there's much to discuss here with you. Most of the time stress cardiomyopathy occurs in the patient elderly, more than 50%, more than 50 years, and female with the event of any event, like her husband died and she developed this abrupt chest pain, and she is presenting in the ER with the history of chest pain after her husband died. So and your supervisor or professor is giving the age of like 50 years, so then you need to think about the stress cardiomyopathy in those patients. What would you get the echo? As I have discussed here, if the apex is involved, that it probably would be the apical akinesia, which is the most commonest involvement in the stress cardiomyopathy. But you would get you may would have the known apical Takotsubo, that would be the basal and the focal. So basal would be obviously it would be on the basis, and focal would be at any part of your heart. Okay, so including actually here we have to divide again. This is the basal portion and this is the mid ventricular portion of the Takotsubo, and focal is like at any part of the heart. So actually you have four types: basal, mid ventricular, and focal. So and these two basically are non-apical, because these are not at the apicus apex. In the apical Takotsubo you would have the like your LV on echocardiography looks like a octopus shape or looks like a Takotsubo. But in non-apical you would not appreciate the heart, the shape of the heart like the Takotsubo, and the non-apical are basal, which present usually at the basis of the heart, and mid ventricular, which probably would be at the mid ventricular, and the focal, which could be at the any part of the, which could involve any part of their heart. So I hope that I have made it very simple for you guys and made it very crystal clear myself and all these topics which we have discussed here a few minutes back. as we discussed three things here: silent ischemia, and second thing is your microvascular angina or syndrome X, and third one is stretched cardiomyopathy. So these are actually very important things, sometimes, most of the time actually, in the part 2 examination, the FCPS examination of the cardiology. Part 2 FCPS of cardiology usually discuss these things with you in their examination, so you need to understand all these things and the echocardiographic involvement of the cardiomyopathy. I hope that they would help you in your examinations as to and to enhance your knowledge of cardiology. Pray for me, subscribe my channel, and please push the bell button. That's why because after pushing all and after doing all these things, you would get all the future updates of my channel, and you will inshallah get the benefits of these online lectures. Inshallah. Take care. Allah Hafiz.